everyone. Today's video has been a long time coming, and it's finally here. The end of the Human Form series. It took me more than a month of solid work to put it together. I hope you agree that my efforts were worth the wait. Today, I'm going to be creating a hollow glass female figure. In the previous Human Form videos, I've covered making this form in solid glass. And if you watch those videos, you'll notice that there are many concepts that carry over to the method for making it with tubing. But the differences are significant, and the process somewhat more complicated. So you might ask, why make human figures in hollow glass at all? Well, the answer is that beyond a certain scale, it's actually easier to make them hollow. Sure, the seals can be a bit more complex, but you don't have to worry as much about maintaining a deep heat base as you would with thick solid glass. Generally speaking, if the glass has to be more than 1 inch thick anywhere, hollow forms are easier to construct. Today's figure is right at the cusp. It's small enough so that it would not be too difficult in either solid or hollow glass. I've decided on this scale for the sake of expediency. I just don't want this video to be any longer than it needs to be. So sit back and enjoy today's video. I have a lot to show you, so pay attention. Let's do this.
This figure will be done in color instead of clear glass. It's going to be a component of a much bigger and more complex sculptural piece. It's an open pose, sort of a jogging stance. The arms are positioned to be holding a string of objects between the hands. The head is tilted off to the left in a continuation of the direction of the implied movement. The first step is to prepare tubing of the proper diameter. I'll need 3 sizes: a short length of 25 mm for the torso, about 6 inches of 20 mm for the legs and head, and about 8 inches of 12 mm for the arms and other additions. I'll also need a little solid stringer, which I pulled down from scrap pieces of tubing. This color is not encased. Using a clear clad tube can create visible seams where 2 pieces are sealed together, and we don't want that. I begin the same way I do with a solid figure, with the torso. First, I shape the pelvic area from one end of the 25 mm tube, gathering up the bottom 40% and flattening it using a rolling motion. Then I handle up and switch ends. I heat the center that will become the waist until it stretches slightly. I use my wheel jack to cut the tube precisely where I want. This leaves the remaining part of the 25 mm tube already prepared for a handle to be attached. I close the end of my torso with a quick dab from a 10 mm rod. And then I heat up the other end and flatten it using a rolling motion. The result is the same peanut shape I use for my solid female figure. I use my sculpting knife to press lines into the torso that represent the abdominal detail. Just as in the solid figure, these lines will soften into contours as I work the piece. I crease a line down the center of the back to represent the spine. Once I have the basic form of the torso completed, I attach a punty to the top and heat the abdomen until it can move. Then I pose the torso, as close to the final pose as I can get. I'll have an opportunity to modify the pose later in the process, but the closer I get to it now, the easier it will be to finish later. I open a hole at the top of the torso and attach a new handle there. I burn off the old handle and clean up the bottom of the pelvis. As this animation shows, each of the 5 major hollow seals will have to be shaped so that the body part will be added at as close to its final position as possible. This reduces the need for bending the part after adding it, which can buckle and warp the walls of the tube. When making the solid figures, I used what I call landing pads to join the arms and legs to the torso. But in the hollow form, these seals are open. The landing pads are replaced by holes. I heat an area of the pelvis that corresponds to where the landing pad would be and pop open a hole. Please refer to my previous videos on making the human form in solid glass for a more thorough explanation of the landing pads. I take the time to shape both sides of each seal so they will join in the direction I want the limb to be in the final position. I seal off the handle with a small stopper so I can use air pressure while making the seal. I get both sides as hot as I can and stick them together. Then I puff very gently while drawing the addition just slightly away from the seal. This helps to smooth out the inside of the seal, which will reduce the amount of cleanup necessary. This leg is bent at less than 90 degrees, so I add the entire leg at once, shaping the thighs and calf with the heat. Sometimes a little exaggeration is needed to get the proper shape. Here I push a little too much, and then tug the leg back into the proper shape as I heat the area above the ankle. This type of move obviously takes practice to pull off consistently. I draw out the shin and leave enough material at the end for the foot. I get back to the thigh to pelvis seal as quickly as I can so it does not get too cold, and then I use my mini torch to smooth out the seal. The cleanup is done using a method I call 4-pointing. I clean up one side, then let the seal cool. Then I clean up the opposite side and let it cool. This process is repeated for the perpendicular sides. By allowing the seal to cool before proceeding, the cold side of the seal holds the leg in place while I move to the next spot. Note that I do not use a bridge. There's nothing wrong with using bridges, but my rule of thumb is that I bridge when I have to. Here, it is not necessary. In fact, it's somewhat beneficial to be able to move the leg if I need to while I'm cleaning up the seal. I modify the contours of the calf by heating and gently puffing. I want the form to be nicely rounded and tapered. I heat and puff out little bumps to represent the knees. I open the hole for the other leg and prep it the same way. You might wonder why I don't shape the leg first and then seal it on. The reason is that without the rest of the body to use as a visual reference, getting the proportions and scale of the leg right can be somewhat difficult. Instead, I prefer to shape the leg on the fly. This leg is bent at more than a right angle, so I will add it in 2 parts. The thigh is shaped by the heat gradient. No other tools or shaping techniques are used, just the heat. I burn off the leg at the knee and clean up the seal like I did the other leg. No bridge needed here either. Before adding the lower leg, I finish the pelvic area. This is because that area is hot right now, and it's a good time to get this done. I shape up the abdomen, heating and puffing out a nice little belly, and then creasing the lines between the belly and groin to meet the abdominal lines that are there already. Note the time I take to carefully sculpt the contours of the upper thigh and buttocks. I use a knife to create the crease in the butt and the mini torch to make small adjustments in the shape. I use a combination of heat and gravity to make subtle changes in the contours in order to get exactly the shape that I want. I have my trusty benchtop Bunsen burner on at all times so I can restore the heat base whenever I think it's necessary. The lower leg is added using shaped seals. I carefully pick any excess glass off the edge of the hole. The opening in the addition is also prepped to minimize excess glass in the seal. I stopper the handle and seal the lower leg to the knee using a light puff and tug to smooth out the inside of the seal. The shin and calf are shaped by selective heating. I leave enough material at the end for the foot. And Then I clean up the knee seal using the 4-point method. Finally, I roughly shape the feet. I'll work more on them later. The right foot is not important at all because it will be sealed to the base of the piece and any detail there will be lost. I take a little more time with the left foot, paddling up the arch and bending the tip to resemble toes. I puff out the heel and the foot is complete. I make some final adjustments in the pose of the legs by heating up the pelvis and knees just enough so that I can move things a little. Then I clean up any small wrinkles with my mini torch. With the legs complete, it's time to switch ends. I open a hole at the bottom of the right foot and weld my new handle on there. Here, I use my tungsten pick to close a small hole. Then I bend the handle so that the figure is more or less aligned with the axis of the handle. I pick off what is left of the old handle and smooth out the upper body into a nice round shape. Just as it was for the solid figure, there's not enough material in the shoulder area to seal arms to, so I must add glass there. But in a hollow form, this must be done by adding small bubbles and melting them in. I open a hole in the shoulder and use my 12mm prep to add a bit of glass. This is not a shaped piece, so I don't have to be too careful about this. Just get the material added on and smoothed out. I puff the addition out until the wall thickness is consistent throughout. Then I repeat the process for the other side. I check the symmetry and contours of the upper torso to make sure everything is right before moving on. To complete the upper torso, I need to add breasts. There's not enough material in the chest wall to simply puff out the breast shape, so I need to add small bubbles of glass there in the same way I did the shoulders. Only this time, the shape is more critical. I open a small hole and ream it out slightly, and then I add a small bit off the 12mm tube. Melting the breast in is trickier than the shoulder was because the shape is important. I carefully move around the perimeter of the seal, taking care not to get too much of the surrounding chest hot. I want to restrict the breast to just the place where the addition was made. Then I heat up the tip of the breast until I can puff it out into a rounded shape. Ideally, I want the wall thickness to be consistent throughout the chest and breast. If I apply my heat correctly, I can control the shape of the breast into the pleasantly shaped mound I want without having to sculpt or touch the breast with a tool. The other breast is added and shaped in the same way. I take care to make this one the same size and shape as the first one. Finally, I add nipples. I have found it is better to heat the tip of the breast and tag it with a stringer and pull the nipple out instead of adding a small dot. The head comes next. Again, I have found it is better to sculpt the head in place instead of making it in advance and adding it on. I just get better results this way. I open a hole at the center of the top of the torso and ream it open slightly. I leave a small bead of glass around the opening that will become part of the seal. I prepare the end of the 20mm tube by jacking down the neck with my tweezer jacks. This also thickens the glass in the neck, which will help with shaping and posing the head later. I make the seal, puffing and pulling gently to smooth out the inside of the seal. I position the addition so that the neck leans slightly forward. Then I burn off the tube, leaving enough material behind to shape the head. I 4-point the neck seal, taking care to create a nice taper where the trapezius muscles are. I heat the bleb at the end and puff it out thin. Then I heat behind the thin end and melt the top of the head into a round shape with even walls. As the head cools, I use my paddle to rough shape the head. It should be narrower than it is long and slightly wider in the back. If I time it correctly, I can accomplish this initial shaping entirely within the time the head is cooling, getting it done without having to reheat. Next, I soften the transition between the back of the head and neck, creating the nape. I heat the face of the head and tag the chin with a cold rod. I gently puff while pulling the chin down and away from the face. This forms the jaw. I heat the tip of the jaw and puff to even out the wall thickness there. I heat along the base of the jaw and reinforce the jawline on each side with my sculpting knife. I use a small, tight flame to heat the center of the face and use a graphite tool to press in dents to represent the eyes. One last little tug on the chin sharpens it up and creates a slightly more angular face. I add a small dab of glass from my colored stringer just above the tip of the jaw and bisect it with my knife to make the mouth. I add another small dab just above the mouth between the eyes for the nose. Finally, I add and flatten small dabs of glass at the end of the jawline to represent ears. All of these moves are done quickly and simply. It just does not pay at this scale to fuss much with the face. If I can just get the contours and profile right and keep it all symmetrical, my face will read just fine. With the head complete, I now cold seal a rod to the top and heat up the neck. This is where a thick neck comes in handy. With a slight puff and a gentle tug, I can pose the head at any angle I wish, and then cleanup is minimal and quick. The final touch is 2 quick lines drawn with my knife from the base of the trapezius to the base of the neck to represent the clavicle. The arms are done in much the same way the legs were. I open a small hole in my extended shoulder and seal on my 12mm tube. I puff and tug the seal to smooth out the inside. Then I heat about a ½ inch down the tube and tug again, creating a contour where the lower forearm should be. I hesitate, letting the heat drain out, and then reheat just a little lower to begin shaping the lower arm. Once the heat gradient is set properly, I draw the forearm out to the wrist in the general direction I want the arm to be positioned. Finally, I burn off the tube, leaving enough glass for the hand. With the arm complete, I heat up the end and puff it into a ball and flatten it. I'll make the hands later. I go back to the shoulder seal and clean it up by 4-pointing it. This is a much smaller seal than the legs were, so 4-pointing can be tricky. Don't feel weird if you feel the need to bridge here, just because I chose not to. Once the seal is clean, I puff out small bulges at the top of the shoulders to represent the deltoids. I take the time to shape the arm a little bit, especially in the elbow area. The other arm is done exactly the same way. The only difference in this arm was that I did not have enough glass in the shoulder area for the deltoids, so I had to add a little dab from my colored stringer. And there you have it. The figure is complete. And here is the same figure in the final sculpture, called Pearl Girl 4.
Well, that concludes the Human Form series. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. Please come back here and watch it again as many times as you want. Leave your comments below and be sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button. I promise you won't have to wait so long for the next one. Oh, and if you're tired of seeing me in these silly flowered shirts, and you make shirts or you have a better one that you'd like to see me use in these videos, please feel free to contact me. I'm always interested in new silly shirts to wear. Until next time, see ya.